What's up, guys? Today I'm bringing you back yet another Q&A. So if you got any questions, post yours down below and let's begin. Hey Alpha, why is the bench press so hard to gain strength at compared to other lifts like squat or deadlift? Has to do with strength potential. Just think about it. Lots of people are squatting the 4s, deadlifting the 5s. How many guys do you know that could bench 4 or 5 natty? It's rare because the bench press is muscle dependent. Think of it like this. Your average elite bencher probably has an arm measurement between 16 and 18 inches. What does an elite squatter have? 25 to 30 inches. So there's a massive gap in musculature. Not to mention the fact that the squat and deadlift involve more muscles, and you can modify the body leverages far more, like doing sumo deadlifts or low bar squats, as well as modifying the depth. Bench press is you touch your chest, you pause, that's all there is to it. And the pause is also a unique feature of this competition lift. It also matters the least in terms of getting the biggest total for powerlifting. Those at the highest level, obviously they're strong all the way through, but they tend to have an edge on the squat and deadlift. So it's not really your fault. It's like asking, why does the OHP stall so soon? Because most natties aren't going to do 250 pounds. So by that definition alone, 185, you're already creeping up there. And I would extend that to the bench as well. If a lot of you are going to end up with a 315 bench, I can see why you're starting to get plateaus at the 250 mark, because you're already closing in. Does that make sense? Obviously, you're probably capable of more, but that's a whole other topic. And it'll require a different level of programming and a lot of patience, let me tell you. So I'll just simplify this question by saying, your strength potential is limited by your muscular potential. And the lower body has a lot more of that, let me tell you, as well as the back, which contributes to squats and deadlifts. Hey Alex, I'm trying to increase my bench. Getting to 405 is my goal. My current max is 365 and my arms are just under 15 inches. Do you think it makes sense to try and train my triceps specifically to increase their size in order to help my bench? I sometimes neglect them. Personal stats, 175 body weight, 21 years old, 2 years religious lifting. Man, you are a fucking beast with serious bench potential. By the time you're my age, man, you're going to be in the 400s easy. I can pretty much guarantee it, provided that you don't get injured. And it's insane because there's so much more mass for you to gain. If your arms are slightly under 15, yet you're benching 365, bro, what does that mean when your arms are 16, 17 inches? Which you can probably do with benching potential like that. And you've been lifting for 2 years. How strong are you going to be in 8 years? Me. I think a lot of guys are really jealous of you right now. Just saying. Anyway, my response is yes, train your triceps. I'll say in your case, if you can get them to 15 and a half inches, you'll probably have that 4 or 5 bench. And recognize this important point. Even though the gains have been amazing up until now, they're going to slow down soon. And when that happens, your strength potential is going to be limited by your size. So instead of doing more bench, more specificity, it'll be in your best interest to focus on hypertrophy training. And that's where correcting weaknesses comes into play. And for you, I can obviously tell right now that triceps will be a problem unless you start addressing them specifically. Don't neglect isolation work and don't neglect special movements that put a little bit more emphasis in the region. So don't be skipping out on your close grip bench. I'd recommend some accommodating resistance as well, like bands or chains. Maybe some board pressing in there too. Low positions, obviously, half board to 2 board. Pin pressing. Just check out some of my videos for exercise variation, but what I would suspect is you're likely a torso dominant lifter like me. And there's a high chance that your pecs and shoulders are both very well developed. So in your case, vertical pressing or even inclines might not be the name of the game. You got to work more in the flat plane while really taking those triceps to the next level. I think that is what's going to accelerate your bench. There's very little to worry about in your situation. What are your thoughts on focusing more on the posterior chain and less quads? That's my philosophy as we live in a quad dominant lifting society. Everybody's obsessed about having massive legs, tree trunks in general, the definition to go with it. And there's nothing wrong with that. You do you. But when it comes at the expense of neglecting your glutes and hamstrings, we got a serious problem for knee pain and being weak overall. I'm sorry. You won't perform the best athletically if your posterior chain strength is not on point. Not happening a million years. Your deadlift is going to be garbage for one, since those are the prime muscles that help you lift it. Obviously, you can be a back dominant lifter too, but you'll never reach your potential without having the developed glutes and hamstrings. And it just looks off as well. You turn from the side, you got fucking pancake ass, no thickness whatsoever, just when you're standing in front. So not only does it look ridiculous, it also contributes to further imbalances. You probably need less quad work, more direct hamstring work. Seriously, this is the missing link in a lot of leg days. Everybody's obsessed with quads, quads, quads. It's not the dude from the front you got to be concerned about. It's when he turns around. Now, I'm not telling you to neglect your quads. You can still isolate them or perform certain accessories at the end, but definitely switch your mindset to being posterior chain oriented instead of quad focused. You'll be a lot happier in the long term, not only for getting stronger, looking more aesthetic, but also preventing injuries to the max. That's how you do it. How to fix shoulder pain and overhead barbell extensions. Could it be a mobility problem? Thanks for the great content. I really love it. Well, thank you for your support, brother. And I'm always happy to make these videos for you guys. In terms of dealing with shoulder pain during overhead extensions, yeah, it's a mobility problem as well as the uncomfortable nature of the exercise. So an easy fix around this would be to do the exercise seated with those high pads. This way you have upper back support. If you don't have those, then do it off an incline bench, though it will change the strength curve of the lift and the overall mechanics. So I would say it's worse than standing up, but you're still going to get great gains regardless. Or if you don't want to do overextensions with a barbell, try it on the cable sit-up with the rope bending forward. A lot of guys find that to be much more comfortable. And really, as long as you're getting an isolation exercise in general, you should be fine. The overhead helps with the long head of the triceps, but you can also get that stretch by doing decline extensions. So you don't necessarily have to have your arms up here in order to get massive arms. And look up some basic shoulder mobility routines on YouTube. One of the best I can recommend is by Donnie Thompson, his shoulder protocol. So be sure to check that out. It includes using a lot of band exercises. And I think if you combine that with doing dead hangs, you're going to be in a great spot. So not only will this help your overhead extensions, but you'll feel that much more safe when you bench and OHP. Hey Alex, what do you think about doing a Bulgarian style training with one arm chin-ups, considering the person already has well-conditioned elbows? It would work really well. My only concern would be overuse, which can definitely happen. And not only have I seen this in some calisthenics athletes, I've also experienced it to a certain extent. Not that I was doing Bulgarian one-arm chins, just that I was using grease in the groove. So it's a bit of a different strategy, but I was able to do 5 one-arm chins. So I was like, F it. Let's do one whenever I feel like doing it. I can't tell you how consistent it was or the exact repetitions. Obviously, it wasn't extremely structured there. But what I can tell you is that I started to look a little bit crooked. Maybe my fault to a certain extent since my left side was stronger than the right. But the point is I developed a slight imbalance and a little bit of overuse was starting to kick in. Which, how do you want to prevent that from happening? You can use the one-arm chins with bands. You can change the grip width from neutral to pronated to underhand, but it's still a really similar exercise. I don't feel like you're modifying it that much. It's like a guy running a conjugate program, just doing close grip bench, wide grip bench, pause, touch and go. Yeah, you can pull that off to a certain extent, but you can't tell me that minimizes overuse more than rotating the bar completely or just switching from a bench press to a floor press. So I see the same logic being applied to one-arm chins. If you're going to do that, try to find some creative variations that are a lot different. And I think that'll do you well for the elbows and your shoulder health. And obviously, when you do this, make sure they hit both sides equally. And if there's a strength imbalance, put more attention on the other side. So that might mean doing 5 times a week on the left side, 7 for the right. Just to help a little bit. But honestly, I probably would not recommend this unless you're trying to peak or really specialize, but I just don't want you getting snapped up. And I can see this happening, even if you are conditioned. So be very careful, even though you will get great gains from doing this. It's pretty much max effort or close to it, and you're getting an insane way to stretch on the lats, and you're going to build some pretty nice biceps doing this as well, because it's your body weight being pulled up with one arm. Like, it's serious business. Don't think it's going to be easy recovery. Certainly not on a Bulgarian program. Does losing the mind-muscle connection in your workout mean you're fatigued? Keep up the awesome content. Thank you, man. Usually, yes. We've all heard gym bros saying, when you lose the pump, that's when you screwed up in terms of recovery, and you're probably overdoing the volume, doing far too much junk work in there. So what program are you running is what I'd ask. The fact that you're mentioning mind-muscle connection is not a bad thing because I've referenced it before, but are you training like a roided out fake natty? Doing a bunch of isolation movements, super high volume, fluff and pump, not really focusing on progression. If that's how you're training, then I can understand why by the fourth or fifth curl, you're starting to lose that pump on your biceps and you can't really feel it as much because it's too much and you're training like someone who is on a bunch of steroids. And unfortunately, this is what has been trending these days. Again, we saw that world die off, now it's being resurrected. And it blows my mind that a lot of these guys are so popular and they're just killing it, you know? And I still see people complaining all the time that they're struggling to gain mass. It's like, at some point you got to realize who the real natties are and what the best advice actually is. But different topic altogether. I'm not even going to rant about that stuff. Point is, if you normally get pumped, because you don't actually have to be mega pumped up during your workout. So if you normally get that and you could normally feel the muscle being targeted to a magnificent extent, but now that's not happening, then yeah, you're probably doing too much junk volume, or you've exceeded your maximum recoverable volume, or the fatigue is caught up after all these weeks and months, or perhaps you just got to address your diet and lifestyle factors a little bit more, or the program in general sucks. Could be that too. Hey Alex, thanks for the video. Why do you think people like Dave Tate or Matt Wenning don't like the overhead press? You seem to get great results from it. Would love to hear your opinion. Best wishes from Germany. Well, best wishes from Canada. It's interesting because everyone who follows the conjugate system has their own unique take on it. And you have to listen to everybody and find out what's most applicable to you and obviously experiment. Now, Dave Tate and Matt Wenning might be in agreement, but guess who would disagree with their statements? Louis Simmons and Burley Hawk. So Louis, being the mastermind behind all this, is constantly recommending it. And you can see it when you read the articles, if you go on the West Side page. Like, the OHP is a staple. And it's always been recommended for getting bench press carryover and having massive delts in general. And in my experience, it fucking helps like crazy. That's why I do it at the end of my program. I even took out the inclines because I felt the OHP was doing more for me. So it depends on the individual. If we're talking about the carryover aspect, you know, some guys just don't have lagging shoulders, and this exercise is less beneficial for them compared to other movements. Like, you might benefit from inclines a lot more, just doing more flat pressing in general. But for someone who has a very weak OHP compared to flat press from a ratio standpoint, man, it's extremely helpful. And Burley Hawk, he's done overhead presses with 3 plates for reps. And I think he bench pressed over 600 pounds raw. So his numbers are similar to Matt Wenning, but I think he's a little bit stronger on the raw side. But correct me if I'm wrong about that. So there's really no right answer here, but I think their main concern would be injuring the shoulders. And I think that stems from the belief that overhead pressing leads to shoulder impingement, which I thought was true a long time ago until I read Starting Strength, the articles by Mark Ripito, as well as checking out his videos. And the main point he argued was that as you overhead press, the scapula actually rotates. So when you're in the locked out position, there literally is no impingement going on. Physiologically, it cannot happen. And if you have the right shoulder mobility to go as well, like, you're good to go. In some cases, the overhead press can be used as a rehab tool. If you got messed up shoulders, you start doing more of those. But then I've heard some other biomechanics experts argue the complete opposite. So who's right? Man, you gotta decide that for yourself in terms of the injury perspective and strength gains that you get. You are a big proponent of Matt Wenning, but you also always hate on junk volume for natural lifters. What's the difference between junk volume and high volume warm-ups like the Wenning Warmup? I'm confused because you're against the one but recommend the other. Thank you very much. Well, thanks for your question. These are completely unrelated techniques. The Wenning warm-up is a warm-up. So let's say I decide to work up to 315 on the bench, and I do empty bar, 45, 2 sets of 10, 135 for 5, 185 for 3, 225 for 1, 275 for 1, and then I start 315. Does that mean everything leading up to that point was junk volume? No, it's a warm-up. And the same thing with the Wenning warm-up. It's usually 4 sets of 25 for an upper back exercise, tricep movement, and press. All done with a very light weight. You're pumping blood into the muscle. It takes no more than 8 to 12 minutes. It's super fast. And it's supposed to make you feel better going into your session while building work capacity. So what does this accomplish? In a way, you don't have to do GPP work. You can skip it at the end because you're getting in shape from the start. And that little bit of extra volume over time adds up. So I don't see how you can compare the two. The Wenning Warmup will not affect your recovery in a negative way at all. It primes you up for lifting, gets you more conditioned over time, increases your total workload in a way that's effective, and you started off with it, obviously. So how can that be considered junk volume? It's not. In fact, it can prevent minimalism since you're doing a direct tricep exercise as well as smashing up the back a little bit harder. And a lot of guys are neglecting their rows. They're doing not enough compared to the pressing. So this can help in correcting that ratio to a certain extent, especially if you're lazy on upper lower programs. Yo, Alex, saw your vid on doing RDLs and rack pulls if you can't deadlift off the floor. Could this be done on your novice program? Currently can't deadlift because of my current floor situation. Hey, if that's your situation, go ahead and do that. But know that the good mornings at the end of the program will help you tremendously regardless. So I can see you getting a very strong deadlift, even if you don't necessarily do the exercise. But that's another topic altogether. You could do this, but what if you consider buying those quiet bumper pads? Rogue Fitness sells them and Bells of Steel. So that's what I would do. Get the bumper pads and stand up on some horse stall mats. This way it's nice and stable and you can get a complete range of motion without making any noise whatsoever. I think that's the most specific, best solution for your gains and reducing noise completely. So let me know if you're going to go down that path. But yeah, if you decide to do RDLs instead, you're still going to get very strong. And I would argue that the first time you ever test your conventional deadlift in the gym, it's going to be a great one to max. Hey Alex, what are your thoughts on dead stop pull-ups, touching feet, touching weight on the ground after each rep? It helps me from swinging and messing up my sets. That's a really cool concept. I used to do these years ago on the Country Crush pull-ups because it was just the nature of the lift. As I suspended the device, I wasn't able to get a full stretch at the bottom unless I fully bent my legs and didn't use the loading pin. So I found that it's exactly what you said. Cuts out the swinging completely, like it's literally inexistent, and you get a smooth pull every single time, and it's actually easier on recovery. So just like a bench press off pins is effective, same with the squat, same with the belt squat, where you break up the eccentric concentric chain, why would this not apply to the pull-ups? Why the hell not? You know what? It's another great exercise in your toolbox, and I should be recommending this more now that I really think about this, and you're the one who brought that back to my attention. So kudos to you. Keep doing this. It's fucking great. But obviously, still mix in the regular pull-ups because you want to get that weighted stretch and specific action of hanging in that deep position. It's not the same. And keep in mind, if you're doing dead stop without having the angles on point, you might be doing partial reps, which again might not be a bad thing if you're trying to get certain joint angle specific gains. But when you're doing the pull-ups dead stop, you got to be in the full range of motion, not bent over here, which could potentially happen when you're doing dead stop. So as long as you address the range of motion and you're not running a minimalist program, bro, you're going to get very strong. Hey, Alex, if I do full body workout 3 times a week, do I need to do vertical and horizontal movements on the same day? Or can I do vertical push and pull on one day and horizontal push and pull on the other? Yeah, you can do that, man. The beauty of full body training is its flexibility. A lot of people are under the false impression that every single movement pattern must be executed in the same session, when that cannot be further from the truth. In fact, it demotivates a lot of lifters because they look at the program and like, what the fuck is this? I'm doing flat bench, overhead press, row, pull up, isolations, and then I gotta do the lower body in there too. Like, you don't have to do all that. Some workouts could be more squat focused, the other days more hip hinge focused. It's still full body. That's not a lie. One workout can emphasize more OHB compared to flat pressing. It's not a shoulder day because you're still gonna hit some accessories at the end, but there's slightly more emphasis in different movement patterns. Nothing wrong with that. It's great on recovery, amazing for general strength, obviously, and allows for easier training sessions while not being lazy on certain exercises. So if you feel like alternating barbell rows and weighted pull-ups, nothing wrong with that. So you can do horizontal twice a week, vertical once a week, or you can do an AB setup so it's constantly being managed like that. Hey, you experiment and get those gains. Hi Alex, apart from eyeballing it, how do you tell if one is losing more muscle than fat when cutting? You're not gonna lose more muscle than fat when cutting. If you're doing this as a lifetime natural, yeah, you're probably gonna get a bit smaller there, but not to the extent that you would think. So if you drop 20 pounds of fat impossible that you're going to drop 20 pounds of muscle. Not happening. You can even run the worst diet imaginable. It's not going to happen. Obviously, not optimal, but it just goes to show that you can preserve a lot easier than you've been led to believe. Look at me. I did a bunch of 48 and 72-hour fasts during my cuts. Never had problems with that. And even if you do lose a bit, guess what? Muscle memory. You start training hard again, you eat a little bit more food, getting a surplus, it comes back in no time at all. So now you're leaner and you have your former size, or at least super close to it. So the way to prevent it, make sure that you're not yo-yoing your diet, obviously. Have a consistent calorie deficit, adequate protein, still train hard, try to preserve your strength. And for measurements, you can obviously use tape with a body fat caliper. I suppose that would be the best way of tracking how much lean tissue you're actually losing. But keep in mind, you're gonna have to do some math when you start plugging these numbers over the month. So I wouldn't even recommend doing that. Just look at yourself visually and what your numbers are being reflected at in the gym. Yo, Alex, what do you suggest to add variation to the OHP? Buying a Swiss bar or a Buffalo bar? I can only buy one of them for now. Thanks, keep up the great content. Well, thank you. For the overhead press, I would definitely recommend buying the Swiss bar because, look, I bought a Buffalo bar too. It's on the way. But I don't think it's going to be a staple on the OHP. First of all, the range of motion is deep enough already. Just by you touching your collarbones, it's enough, trust me. And some guys don't even go that far to begin with. Like you can do right under your chin, and I wouldn't have a problem with that whatsoever. I would not consider that to be a detrimental partial. Feel free to do that exclusively if you choose to. It's not bad is what I'm saying. So that you can use a Buffalo bar and try to go even deeper than your collarbones. And also consider this, besides range of motion. The movement pattern is very similar to a straight bar. Almost too similar, to the extent that it wouldn't minimize overuse as well as Swiss bar pressing. So that will give you the neutral grips, not only the close position, but the medium and the wide. So you got 3 different ways of doing the OHP. And if we factor in accommodating resistance and pins, now the options are going to be infinitely higher. And I would argue that the Swiss bar OHP is a completely different beast to begin with. You saw me bench 355 on that thing, even though I probably could have done 385 on that exact same day on the straight bar. So great stimulus fatigue ratio. It's hard as hell. It's humbling. It minimizes overuse like crazy. To me, this is the obvious choice. But obviously the Buffalo bar is great too. It's going to allow you to squat in a way that's easier on the shoulders, and you can get more range of motion for benching. So a lot of guys use benching to complement their OHP. It's a supplemental lift. Hey, I can see that being beneficial. But the benefits on the vertical pressing, I don't know. I don't think it's going to be to the same extent as Swiss bar pressing, not at all. As a more torso dominant individual, would you recommend getting stronger on compound lifts or prioritizing hypertrophy? What? Or a mix of both for gaining arm size? Prioritizing hypertrophy is not separate from emphasizing compound movements. So I don't know where you got that from. I don't know what bro scientist is promoting that on this platform. But I feel sorry for you or anyone who's been led to believe this. But to answer your question, as a torso dominant lifter, the compounds should still be emphasized. That's how most naturals will gain the majority of their size. Not only their foundation, but keep in mind, there are exercise variations that will put more target on, say, the triceps, like the close grip bench press, or using accommodating resistance. Heck, even the Swiss bar bench, which the neutral grip will do a slightly better job at emphasizing those tries. There's a reason why we lift a lot less on this exercise compared to the straight bar. So the only modification I would make as a torso dominant lifter is, one, the variations. Make sure that they emphasize your weaknesses slightly more. And secondly, would be to never skip out on your isolation work. That can mean doing 1 tricep push down and 1 barbell extension at the end of your program, or just doing 1 isolation period. I'm not going to tell you what that exact program should entail. But in regards to hypertrophy training, like, you have to have adequate volume and induce progressive overload with sets that aren't too minimal. So you can't just do 1 set of 10 on a close grip bench and call it a day. Get in that 10 to 20 set week range while hitting specific compounds and isolations. You're gonna grow. Finally, realize this imbalance will take time to correct, and possibly not fully, since we all have our genetic strengths and weaknesses, but you can definitely improve a lot more compared to what you are now. And I know that in my case, the triceps are finally starting to catch up. And I know that from a strength perspective, they're pretty much up there. Whereas in the past, they were a serious problem. Like lockouts were always challenging, but now they're starting to get a lot easier. So there's things you could do, but really patience combined with intelligent programming, which includes a combination of compounds and isolations, is the way to go. Hey Alex, as a genetically average person, do you still stand firm with the belief that if I go on your novice program, a 215 bench, 315 squat, and 405 dead could happen in the first 12 to 15 months of my training? Yeah, that's very average. That's what most people can expect to achieve, 12 to 15 months. When I first released that program, I was saying 6 to 12 months, which can absolutely happen for certain individuals. I did it in 8 months. But for you, your genetics might be worse. I would say worst case scenario, 2 years. That's why 12 to 15 is a really good average point. So yes, I still stand by it. It's what I've seen over and over again. I'm confident in saying this is realistic. But if you theoretically don't get it, I would still say don't stress. It's just a matter of time. Dedicate yourself to the iron for 10 years. See what happens. I think you're capable of a lot more, even if you weren't blessed. All right, guys, final question of the week. Wagwan, Alex, what do you think of supersetting inverted rows and push-ups together for high volume work such as 30 down? Man, that would be extremely brutal and a form of conditioning and muscle building that I can't even begin to describe. It kind of reminds me of Iron Wolf because he supersets everything for the most part. So if you do 20 two-pump burpees, you're immediately doing 20 jumping squats right after. So there's really no rest. And even when the guy rests, he's still jogging in one spot. I kind of see this in a similar light, but almost superior in the sense that you're doing opposite movement patterns. When you do your push-ups, your chest, shoulders, and triceps are being maximally fatigued, right? But minimal pressure on the forearms and back and biceps, obviously. So when you do the inverted rows, you're fresh. The only limiting factor is going to be your work capacity. But what's cool about this is you're timing it. You don't have to rest. You don't need to watch. You don't need to track or even have a workout partner because the original 30 down method was I do 30, you do 30. I do 29, you do 29. And this is how you would pace it. But if you're just going back and forth with two opposite movement patterns, for one, you're completely cutting out muscular imbalances, which is the biggest benefit. You're also contributing to conditioning way more, and it auto-regulates the timing. But it does so in a flawless way. Hey, enjoy the gains. So there you have it. That was another awesome Q&A. Absolutely love the questions. So let's see some more down below, and I'll talk to you all in the next one.